Hello, my friends. We are back to finish off chapter 2 for our Management of Contemporary Organizations course. So this video will cover the global piece and also the ethics piece. I don't think I have to state the fact that we are in a flat world right now. Everything is global, our news, the impacts, and everything else. We are in an extremely diverse environment, and the movement of people, apart from the pandemic, but the movement of people is pretty high, right? So we see people move across the globe, work across the globe, and with technology, that's very easy to do today. We have global companies that have offices in multiple parts of the world, and we're just interconnected. I'm also filming this from Northern California. We are a very diverse state, which is one of the reasons I really love being here, actually. So this puts a lot of challenges or requirements on management and leadership today, right? We have to have a mindset where we are open to diverse ideas, where we work with people from different experiences and different backgrounds. So different approaches to management than we saw in 1950, right? I think that is pretty self-explanatory, but it's worth mentioning again, right? So what do we know about management across the globe? We have different cultures, meaning different sets of values and focuses for different places on our globe. And they are not necessarily countries, but they can be. But for an example, right, I am here in the United States, which is a big country. You know, we have over 300, how many right now? 340 million people here. I think last I checked was 330, maybe that was a couple of years ago. And we have East Coast, we have West Coast, we have the middle of the country. So we have a lot of different cultures even within the United States. So we need some sort of framework that's going to help us talk about the values and the views of people. So it's a little bit easier for us to understand each other. We are, at the basic human level, we all have similar needs, right? We need to eat and sleep, we need love, we need friends. So we have some basic human needs, but at the societal and group level, we have some values that we share. And so one of the very first frameworks was Gert Hofstede. It's not on this slide right here. I'm just bringing it in because his research, where he looked at one company, it was IBM. He surveyed and found common characteristics around the globe. So a huge research effort that was extremely broad. And had a big impact on the field of management. He was from Holland. He was Dutch, so I'm probably not pronouncing his name correctly. Here in the US, we would pronounce it maybe Hofstede, but I've heard from some Dutch people when I teach in Sweden that they say it Hofstede, so I try. Anyways, Hofstede.com or Hofstede.com, and you will find everything about his research. I really encourage you to go there. I will actually put it in a comment as well, so you have it there. And then, a decade or two ago, we had a network of global scholars that said, let's look at these characteristics, these management and leadership characteristics that we have around the globe, see if we can validate the Hofstede framework and what else is there to know right now. And so that's the globe study. That's, a multi-year study. And their findings, to some extent, did replicate the earlier global research and then added to it. And so the textbook we are using is focusing on the globe findings as opposed to the Hofstede findings. But regardless, both of those are prevalent and well known in the management field. So here we see with the globe study, we have collectivism twice. Hofstede only talked about it one time, but here we are breaking it down a little bit more. So we are seeing institutional collectivism, meaning more at the country or national broader level, versus in-group collectivism, which is at the unit, team, small group level. And so for the institutional collectivism, it means the extent to which we act as a member of a larger organization. So I grew up in Sweden, I'm from Sweden. Sweden is a great country that looks at the entire group of Swedes, if you will, and feel membership as part of Sweden. And here in the United States, for instance, we are more focused on individual achievements, right? So individualism versus collectivism here at the institutional level. And then similarly, right, but for the group level, again, US is a great example of individual achievements. We focus on the person, his or her immediate family, but it's really about me and my career success, you and your career success, etc. A lot of individual recognition in organizations, rewards in organizations are at the individual level, as opposed to the group level, which we might see in Asian countries like China, where they're focused on the team, the group, as opposed to the individual contributor. We also have the humane orientation, so the extent to which we are rewarding, individuals, groups for being fair, altruistic, and generous. And we see that in Malaysia, as opposed to maybe Germany, in Europe, where it's more about self-sufficiency and being strong in oneself. Future orientation is a part of the original Hofstede framework, which means, are we looking at the present and being present oriented? Here, Russia is a good example of that. Or are we thoughtful and predicting and projecting and planning for the future and taking a more long-term view? And again, this is China as a good example. For your exams that we're going to have in this course, I'm not going to ask you necessarily about the specific countries, but clearly we need to know the different dimensions. Okay, we also have performance orientation, where again, the US and Sweden are good examples of this. So here in the United States, we do reward based on merit. We do reward based on performance, productivity, contribution to the organization, showing excellence, right? And in Sweden, we are more focused on equality, right? So your background, your need, your family, your need. So at the societal level, as well as the organizational level, we see differences in what is recognized and rewarded for. Number 6, uncertainty avoidance, again, validation of earlier frameworks, where we are looking at whether or not the group, the society feels comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, or whether the country or group prefers to put in place policies and structures that provide predictability and stability. So for instance, we have Switzerland as an example here, where we are, whoa, look at that line, too much coffee or not enough coffee today, right? Where we are looking at establishing rules and procedures to create that stability, and with that we reduce uncertainty. Other countries like Malaysia are more comfortable being in that ambiguous spot, and so we might not have as many formal processes, procedures, guidelines, laws, rules, regulations. Assertiveness, the extent to which we value assertiveness, being aggressive, confrontational, right? Polite, we can still be polite and kind, but the fact that we do this direct assertive communication versus sort of putting the lid on, not being comfortable being, bringing up conflict or being in somebody's face. Again, and we can do that in a polite and kind way. We don't have to be rude about it. And so here, United States and Sweden keep coming back, right? Sweden and US have many similarities, but they're also polar opposites on a couple of dimensions, right? So here in the US, it is okay to be more assertive, to be direct in communication. And in Sweden, we tend to not do that as much. Sweden tends to be a pretty conflict averse country, where we value loyalty, solidarity with the group over that conflict. All right. Interesting stuff, right? Power distance, the extent to which we are comfortable with status differences, power differences, or the extent to which we view the world as being flat and everybody has equal value and we're all on the same level. So Sweden has a extremely low power distance. When I'm teaching at the university over there, I am never called doctor or professor. They call me by my first name. If you were to go to Germany, which has more power distance, they would use all the titles available. So I would be called Professor Doctor Jessica, and then probably add some stuff to that as well. So power distance is the extent to which the less powerful members are expected to accept power distances, adhere to it, and show it in communications and interactions. Gender egalitarianism. Norway might be a better example. I have Sweden on the slide here, but Norway might be even more gender equal, higher in gender egalitarianism than Sweden, versus on the opposite side of things where we're more male dominated. So in these gender equal countries, all members of society are expected to contribute to all areas of life, work, family, leisure, etc., versus some other countries where we see more of a split and they tend to be more male dominated. Here we have the example of South Korea. We can also talk about the United States being more on the male dominated side, where we value things like money, status, as opposed to tolerance for everyone. Okay. So if you go to the Hofstede.com or to the Globe websites, they have tremendous resources. If you're interested in this, it is becoming increasingly important. And I think having cultural competencies, CQ or global competencies, is important. So for your own self-learning, right, however you ended up here watching this, I think doing this is tremendously helpful for you. We are going to finish this with, we're talking about sort of ethics and ethical transgressions. Last couple of decades have seen them, quite a few of them here where I live locally in the United States. It's a problem. We have increased legislation around what we can do as organizations when we audit, etc. A lot of your accounting courses will address that. And for our purposes here in this management field, we think about how leaders can act more ethically, how we can make sure that we hire for ethics, we are making sure we have a code of ethics in the organization and that we live it. So as managers, we could say that we face many ethical challenges as people too. And this means that there's a lot of gray areas where we are not quite sure how to do the right thing because there's so many factors going on, right? But in organizations, as managers and leaders, super important, obviously, because we role model our behavior, right? So the employees will look to us, they will listen to our communication, and they will do the same thing. So the goals we set will influence how they act, etc. So extremely important for us as managers to be ethical. And when we survey companies, they don't say we need somebody who's competent in ethics or finance. No, sorry, retract. They don't say we need somebody who's competent in accountancy and finance. We assume that everybody has that technical knowledge. They say they want ethical people. They want people with good communication. Like all these soft skills that we are learning here is what companies look for in the hiring process. Being a great accountant is a baseline. Now we also want to make sure that you can work with other people, that you can lead people, that you can manage teams, right? And ethics is, in the top 3, essentially every time we look at this. And then we can also say sometimes ethical transgressions happen. And why do they happen? Well, we might have unrealistic targets. You might have multiple targets. The Wells Fargo scandal a couple of years ago now is a great example because there were unrealistic pressures within the organization that the people that worked in the retail branches couldn't meet. So they ended up you can read about it, right? They ended up creating fake accounts to meet these goals of unreasonable numbers that was set by management, and huge scandal, and it's been a big fallout from that. So employees, right, they produce, behave to the goals and the targets of the organization. Sometimes we do it, right, because we want to further our career, and sometimes we do it because that's what's required. And I want to keep my job, and I want to make sure I can feed my kids and pay my rent. So if that's what management tells me, that's what happens. And so again, it comes back to managers. We have huge responsibility when we are running these organizations, running, managing, leading our organizations. Okay, this is the last slide for right now. I started this off by saying there's been, very highly publicized scandals. There were fraud, right? There's been legislation that you cover in other classes. So the Sarbanes-Oxley, we don't get into the details here in this management course. We should be aware of its existence. And you have the purpose here on this slide. I'm not going to recount it or reread it. You can pause the video and read it if you want to. But we are really focused here on the fact that now in organizations, we should have, we are required, I should say, to have a code of ethics. So with this code of ethics, we are writing up the way we are ensuring we are staying ethical within our organization. But as I said earlier, we need to make sure that our behaviors, our actions, and our communication are aligned with that, because a code of ethics that sits on a dusty bookshelf or on an intranet somewhere or on a wiki somewhere, and that is not being a living document, that's not being role models, is going to be fairly useless. It always comes back to how we behave and act and communicate. Lastly, we have a 6-step ethical decision-making process. When you make decisions, especially when you find yourself in an ethical dilemma, what's the right thing to do here? We have this 6-step process that helps us. So go back to the textbook, find those 6 steps, because we will see them on the exam, right? But I will list them off really quickly. So the first thing we want to do is that we're going to assess the situation. So what is going on? What are the factors here? We are assessing the situation. Number 2, who are the stakeholders who are impacted, who are touched by this decision, who should have input into the decision? That's the number 2. The number 3 is what are our alternatives, right? What are our options? What are the paths we can pick? We're going to try to be as exhaustive as possible when we look at our options, but there's always constraints and boundaries. So we might not actually do that. So we'll talk more about that when we talk about our decisions, right? Whether or not we are sufficing here. Number 4, which is specific to the ethical decision-making process, is how do you feel? Can you sleep well at night? We do know that there's a couple of percentages always of those, sociopaths, if you will, those without a North Stars, those without empathy, who sleep well at night regardless of what they do. But the vast majority of us, when we put our head on the pillow to sleep at night, if we did something wrong, we know we did. You can feel it in your gut if you're not doing the right thing. So number 4 is how do you feel about it? Number 6, so use it as a compass, right? Use it as a compass and do the right thing. Then you make the decision. That's number 5. You make the decision, you implement the decision. And now number 6, our final step, is going to be assessing, looking in, controlling, if you will, assessing how it's going, and revising as needed. So the number 6 is assessing the situation. That's a wrap. I'll see you back for chapter 3. Take care.